Good morning, it's Liverpool Transfer Daily here on the Blood Red channel. I'm Guy Clarke. Welcome along. With a week left of the window, we're here to discuss the latest Reds rumours with a couple of midfielders plying their trade out in Spain on the radar today. Get your comments and questions in the chat box. Throughout the course of the show, we will be getting to as many of them as we possibly can. Alongside me is Andrew Beasley. And Andrew, it's Champions League draw day today. Excited?
I like, obviously, once the Champions League gets started, but the draw itself will probably take about an hour. So I think I'll probably just look up who Liverpool have got when it's all over and go from there.
I was going to say, if you're watching, are you looking forward to which random former European stars are the men who are plucking the balls out of the pots? But yeah, we will have to wait and see. We'll have a live stream here on the Blood Red channel reacting to the draw as it does go on. Going to be interesting though this year, a bit like obviously a couple of seasons back, where the group stage is basically going to be done and dusted inside 6 weeks.
Yeah, it's going to be a very quick turnaround. So things could take shape sort of very quickly. I mean, obviously, Liverpool won all 6 games in the group stage last season, first English team to do that, and they'll be looking to do similar this year, no doubt, try and get the group done and dusted as early as they can. But obviously it gets underway fairly soon, so no doubt they'll still have some injury problems. So yeah, it may not be quite as straightforward as they would like, but I would imagine, obviously they'll be second seeds. It would still be quite a surprise if they didn't get through, no matter who they're drawn with. But I think probably what they'll be hoping for is sort of the least travel possible. Some opponents from nearby countries would probably suit them best, I think.
Yeah, I mean, as what we're here to do and discuss transfers, is there then need to beef out that squad?
Well, I mean, there always is, or at least there's always sort of discussion that there needs to be, isn't there? I mean, the issue isn't going to go away with the midfielders the club have. Obviously, a lot of very good players, but a lot of injury-prone players, a lot of very young players. So yeah, it's not sort of a Champions League specific issue, is it? It's just sort of a Liverpool issue, and one which may get sorted in the next week, but very equally might not. They may not bring anyone in, and then they'll go with what they've got.
Yeah, let's get into the rumours for today then. And first up, let's talk about Frenkie de Jong. He's been linked with Manchester United and even Chelsea throughout the course of the summer, but reports suggesting that Liverpool now are thinking of making a move for him. Can you see any way in which this one could possibly happen? I mean, the wages he's on at Barcelona are astronomical. He's waiting for a payoff from them as well. To me, it would feel like a bit of a non-starter.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you had to write a story to sort of generate a bit of online interest, I think this would be a pretty good one, because I can't see any sort of basis in reality for this, as you say, with the money that he's on. Obviously, there's been a lot of issues surrounding his salary, and Barcelona trying to pay him less money and all these sorts of things, and talking about, contract isn't valid because it was signed by the previous president, or whatever they call it, So yeah, so much sort of controversy all around that. It just doesn't seem like, I can't imagine he's probably going anywhere now. But yeah, particularly to Liverpool, for them to just out of the blue sign him seems very unlikely. And yeah, I wouldn't put much stock in that story, I don't think.
No, let's have a look at what people are saying in the chat box. Jesse says, can't see us signing anyone. Ricardo saying, need to get Naby out. Warrior saying, get Naby out and we might sign someone. And Bruce saying, Klopp's last press conference, he said he'd been told what he can spend and there's no point worrying about things he can't change, as he'd be told he can't spend again. Well, it is interesting kind of where Liverpool sit. I mean, you mentioned before kind of the blend of the midfield. There are a number of injured players. Naby Keita amongst that list. There are a number of aging players who are being relied upon heavily at the start of this season. And at the other end of the spectrum, a number of teenagers equally. It does feel as though that midfield engine room at the moment is just off kilter somewhat.
Yeah, and it's sort of been on the cards for a while, really, because of the players they've got, and they've had a lot of success with these midfielders. I can see why they've sort of kept faith with them over a number of years, but at the same time, they've now found themselves in this position where they've got veterans and they've got young players, and the ones that are sort of in the middle, well, 2 of them are Keita and Oxlade-Chamberlain. Obviously, a lot of injury problems. And also Fabinho, who was perhaps not quite as bad as the other 2. He sort of fairly routinely misses around 10 games per season normally with injury. So yeah, they've sort of, this has sort of reached a point. Now, obviously, they'll have their plans. Maybe that involves Bellingham next summer and things like this. But obviously, there's a season to get through first, and you don't want to see this season sort of slip away from Liverpool before it really starts because of any issues they've got in the midfield. I mean, it is a hard situation for them because, as Klopp often points out, they've got 9 players for 3 spots. It should really be enough. They've got 9 good players, but you could put a question mark over pretty much all of them, and so it's not as a good a selection as it perhaps seems when you say you've got 9 players.
Yeah, no, definitely. Mitch says that Frenkie de Jong deferred his wages. I wonder if they'll defer his transfer fee. It might be an interesting proposition for FSG. Taking a joke, of course, at Barcelona's financial situation, I'm sure they won't want to be deferring any kind of transfer fee. They need to get the money in. I believe they've still yet to register Jules Koundé as well. And Bruce says, have we outgrown FSG and their Moneyball style? We're not doing as much as other title-ambitious clubs. I mean, it's an interesting point for me, Andrew, in terms of, this summer, potentially a club record signing of a deal that could reach 100 million euros in Darwin Núñez. Just because Moneyball is sort of put out there as a phrase, it doesn't mean having to unearth gems for little to no transfer fee. Darwin Núñez is kind of an example of it, isn't he? Using the data to lead to a signing for Liverpool. But that, as I say there, could potentially reach club record money.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it almost feels like that's been forgotten a little bit. I think Liverpool's transfer strategy, as a general rule, obviously there's always exceptions, but their general strategy is to try and get the deals done early so that the players are in the door. They can have a pre-season with Klopp. They can try and get up to speed more quickly and things like that, which is a very sensible way to do it. But when they do that, you then have 2 months of the transfer window where they don't do anything particularly, and the fans get anxious and other clubs are buying players and things like this. And so it almost gets forgotten. As you say, they've spent potentially 100 million euros on a new striker. I mean, Núñez will be the most expensive player in club history if all the add-ons are met. And it's probably not helped that he's barely played through his own stupidity, partly, but he hasn't really been involved so much yet. So it's not like they haven't spent money this window. Whether they've spent it in the right areas is certainly a valid concern. Could they have bought a cheaper player for the front line and then also bought a midfielder? That's certainly a question that's worth discussing. But they have spent quite a lot of money on Núñez, a lot of money on Núñez, and it sort of already feels like quite a long time ago because they like to get their business done early. But with a long transfer window, that doesn't sort of probably doesn't help.
Yeah, no, definitely. Getting back to the rumours to discuss today, then Frenkie de Jong, we've already touched on. Marcos Llorente at Atletico Madrid, another player being linked, albeit he's still got 5 years left on his contract that runs to 2027. A different profile again of a midfield player. Of course, a few years back, we saw what he could do at Anfield when he dumped Liverpool out of the Champions League, playing off the right-hand side there. Again, this one may be the contract length, but stylistically as well, is that what Liverpool need from a midfielder? De Jong, I kind of understand it would kind of be a similar type profile to Thiago, someone who can progress the ball from deep, but even maybe fill in for Fabinho at times in that number 6 pivot role. But for Llorente, I'm struggling to really understand how that logically makes sense.
Yeah, if you ignore all the contracts and the wages and all these sorts of things, if you're just looking at it stylistically, then De Jong would make more sense, I think, of the two, as you say. But you've sort of hit the nail on the head already, really, with Llorente, whether he's the right style or not. Liverpool don't go for players who are on long contracts. The club's director of research, Ian Graham, has spoken about this when he gave a talk. I think it was the StatsBomb conference, something like that. But basically saying that they don't go for players on long contracts because it's just too difficult to get them out. So even if Llorente was suitable, the fact he's under contract for another 5 years just makes it seem that it's not a deal that's going to be on the cards this summer or next summer or probably the summer after that. They're always looking at guys who are down to like the final sort of 2 years of their contract, stuff like that. So but as we say, I think De Jong probably would make more sense purely on a player basis, but as we've said, probably can't see that happening anyway.
I suppose the only caveat on that is obviously in Spain, players are registered with the league with a release clause. That said, Liverpool like to pay transfer fees over instalments rather than any upfront payment that often has to be paid with a release clause.
Yeah, I mean, that is true. That could play a factor, but I can't think of too many players Liverpool have actually signed from Spanish clubs. And I'm sure the message box will fill up with loads of suggestions now I've said that. But it isn't a market that they particularly shop in, which is not to say that they wouldn't, of course. But yeah, perhaps the way that the deals are done there doesn't really work with their business model, which is why they look at Portugal more and places like that. But yeah, I guess at this point anything's possible, but it certainly seems unlikely.
Yeah, let's get into the chat box then and get to your comments and questions. Divock Origi, he's back. Good to see you, Divock. He says, why are we not signing a Bellingham? I mean, it's one of those, isn't it? Dortmund, again, as you mentioned earlier on, Liverpool did their business early in the summer. So too did Dortmund in selling Haaland. And when they sold Haaland, they sort of made it clear they don't want to lose another big star. And it doesn't matter how desperate Liverpool want to get. Dortmund's stance probably isn't going to change.
No, exactly. I mean, you can imagine, because of the money they've spent on Núñez, you can imagine a world where they spend a similar fee on Bellingham next summer. It's not necessarily the money outright, but signing two players of that value in one transfer window, they've not done anything like that. So, yeah, I think it's easy to say just give Dortmund the money or whatever, but, that's a hell of a lot of money. And obviously, as you say, they're not going to want to sell the same summer they've lost Haaland, but I think everything's going to be geared towards Liverpool trying to sign him next summer. And I guess they'll most likely see how they get on with the midfielders they've got in this season.
Yeah, and Nazar's got in touch. There's rumours of Paredes. I mean, what's your take on that? We've spoken about De Jong, we've spoken about Llorente, another different sort of style of a central midfielder. Exactly what is it do you think Liverpool need? And is Paredes that?
He's probably the best or the most likely of the guys we've talked about today that could happen this summer. I don't think it will, but it sort of feels a bit more likely. He's down to his final 2 years of his deal, and he isn't playing all that much for Paris Saint-Germain. He's obviously got the great sort of passing ability from deep areas. I mean, the Champions League final of 2020, I mean, him and Thiago basically put on a masterclass in passing that night. So you could sort of see him potentially coming in to provide that sort of thing for Liverpool. I mean, he's another player. I think he's 28, so he wouldn't be addressing the sort of issue they've got of sort of peak age players in the midfield or the lack of them. But as I say, I feel like he could possibly. He feels more likely than the others, but I still wouldn't sort of put any money on it.
Yeah, no, it is interesting to see where Liverpool do go. Final one, it has been kind of a midfielder smorgasbord this morning of just talking of all of the different ones. Joel asks, would you go for Yuri Tielemans? I mean, the later the window goes, the less that fee seems to be getting. And he and Wesley Fofana seem to have been outed at Leicester City, put with the under-23s, not involved in matchday squads for the time being. Any chance?
Again, it feels sort of plausible. Obviously, Leicester are in a bit of a mess at the moment. I'm not sure, have they completed a deal yet? Obviously, they hadn't for most of the transfer window.
Yeah, so I don't think they have.
No, so obviously they're not going to want to lose these players. But obviously, if they've got them sort of training with the youth team or whatever, then there possibly could be something in it. That almost feels like a sort of plausible one in that he could be something of a stopgap good player without costing the earth. You wouldn't think. I mean, with all these rumors, I'm sort of struggling to see them happening. But I wouldn't be against that one. I think that could work. He feels like he could be a Liverpool player, but obviously
he also feels as though he could be a bit of a bridging player, doesn't he? He's 25 years of age, and as you say, I don't think he'd probably come in and command being a first choice player for a duration maybe of a Liverpool career, but somebody who, with Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain looking as though he's moving on, someone who could probably fill those kind of minutes in the midfield. It would seem, if the fee were to be right, that Liverpool could. We know they are masters of opportunism in the transfer window, and maybe Tielemans might well fall into that category. Well, that's all we've time for this morning here on Liverpool Transfer Daily. Thanks to everyone for getting involved in the chat box and throwing the names in there. We've discussed De Jong, we've discussed Llorente, we've discussed Tielemans and Paredes. Plenty of midfielders on Liverpool lips right now, and I'm sure that will continue to be the case for the remainder of the transfer window. A week to go. Will Liverpool make a move? We'll keep it here with the Blood Red channel. We will later have a live stream for the Champions League draw. But for now, from myself, Guy Clarke and Andrew Beasley, thanks for your time and your company. It's bye for now.